Jim Paizis, and like Ray, Jim also served on Corvettes, the most numerous and versatile little vessels in the RAN. He was a midshipman on Glenelg and a gunnery officer on board Colac, where he and the Colac's crew were lucky to survive an artillery duel with a Japanese shore battery off the Solomons in May 1945. Great to have you here, Jim.
First of all, could I salute you, Ray, and all your shipmates on the Armidale. One thing Ray didn't say, of the 56 Corvettes that were in our Navy during the Second World War, Armidale was the only one that was lost to enemy action. So, well done, Ray. Nice to see you still here. I went into the Navy at the age of 18 at the September 1942. And after my initial training at Flinders Naval Depot, there was a notice stuck up on a wall. Anybody that thought they could pass a course at the Officers Training School were willing to apply. So I thought I would look rather smart with the gold buttons and a stripe on my arm. So I put my name down and we went before an interview panel, and much to my surprise I was selected, and over we went when we finished our initial training to the Wartime Officers Training School. The training was very brief, 8 weeks, that's all we had, and then off we went as midshipmen. Now, in the audience now, we've got a lieutenant commander, a commander and a commodore. Now, they had probably 10 weeks, where I only had 8. So, right. So anyway, off you went as a midshipman to my first Corvette, the Glenelg, where we were doing mainly convoy escorting up and down the east coast of Australia, because the Japanese had quite an active submarine fleet, and ships were sunk all the way from Brisbane all the way down to Gabo Island off the east coast of Australia. After about a year and a half there, I turned 19 and a half and I got my first stripe as a sub-lieutenant, and I was sent to the Corvette Colac, where most of our adventures occurred. Now, have you any idea about the size of a Corvette? If any of you ever been to Williamstown, there's one there as a museum ship. They weigh about 1,000 tonnes. They were 57 metres long and about 10 metres beam, 80 in the crew, all jammed in a small ship like that. Now, at a time, today, we wonder whether we can build ships in Australia, but there we were in 1940 to 45, with a population of only about 7 million. There were 60 built, 4 for the Indian Navy and 56 for our Navy. The big year was 1942 when they built 33 of them. Anyway, there I was on the Colac as the gunnery officer, doing mainly convoy escort work, helping the army with any inshore operations, bombarding coastal positions. One action that we were involved in for about 3 weeks, we were off Wewak when the army landed to retake Wewak from the Japanese. And during those 3 weeks, with 2 other ships, we spent the time bombarding the coastline and the offshore islands until the day of the landing, when we transported the troops down and they got into the landing barges off our ships, and off they went to retake Wewak. When that operation finished, we were due to come back to Sydney for a refit, but our orders were changed and we were sent instead over to the Solomon Islands, where the army had requested a ship to help them with damaging Japanese landing barges. Now, can you imagine Bougainville, then the Solomon Islands? Well, the island of Choiseul, some people call it Choiseul, is the next island south of Bougainville, and the Japanese were transporting troops across from Choiseul to reinforce their troops on Bougainville, and we were supposed to get in there and try and damage as many of their barges as we could. So with great gusto, we went across to Choiseul, and we were required to enter what they called Emerald Anchorage. Now, if I can describe the scene to you, on the northwestern tip of Choiseul, there is a chain of islands about 900 metres off the coast. So you've got the coastline and 4 or 5 islands off the coast forming Emerald Anchorage, a sheltered harbour. So we sailed in to that harbour. There were no other ships with us to assist if any trouble. The moment we arrived, we saw these Japanese running into the bush to get away from anything we might fire at them. We turned to starboard to steam down about a 3 kilometre long channel, firing at all the barges we could see on the way, and it was like a shooting gallery. Nobody was firing back, and we thought, oh, well, this is great fun. And we damaged quite a number of barges and came out the other end, and that was on the 25th of May. The 26th of May, we went across to land a party on a little island between Choiseul and Bougainville. The Japanese were using as a staging post. A party of us went ashore. Terrible thing to do because none of us were trained in fighting people on land. Luckily, there was nobody on that island after we checked it out. So we got back to the ship. And for some reason, and to this day, I'm not sure whether the captain was given orders to go back into Choiseul again for another try, or whether he thought it was pretty good the first day, let's try it again. In we went through the same narrow entrance, ready to shoot up more barges, and as we turned to travel down the length of the channel, I'm on the bridge, I was in control of the gunfire, and I had a puff of smoke on the shore, a shell flew overhead. And that wasn't supposed to happen. We were supposed to sail down and have another little nice shoot like the day before. Anyway, it was no place to stay. We didn't have the Nelson touch to stand and fight. We turned to come out through the entrance because if the ship was damaged in that little channel, there would have been no hope for any of us. Now, as we turned, the artillery on the shore kept firing, and one shell landed on the quarterdeck right next to a couple of fellows that were manning a 50 calibre machine gun. They died, the two of them, Percy Shute and Stan Smith, both died. And as the ship was completing its turn, another shell landed on the waterline over the engine room and blew a hole about 2 feet by 1 foot. You all understand measurements in feet, do you? Or
yes.
are you all in centimetres? Blew a hole right at the waterline of the engine room, and the engine room started to fill. Now, the engines in a Corvette, there were 2 engines, they were about 3 metres tall, steam-driven. The compartment filled very quickly, and the engine room crew were ordered out of the engine room, so they opened the throttles full, left the engine room, and returned to try and get out through the entrance. Luckily, the Japanese didn't fire any more round at us. I think we might have damaged their gun with the fire that we were firing back at them. So we got out through the entrance with the ship slowly settling by the stern, and we started to throw any movable cargo over the side to lighten the ship at the stern. We had about 80 depth charges, which were pretty heavy. We threw all the depth charges over the side, paid out all the minesweeping gear, and anything movable went out. And the engines by that time were totally submerged, but still working underwater. I remember looking down the hatch over the engine room, and it was like looking at a swimming pool with the 2 engines working and bubbling away. Luckily, the boiler room remained dry. Otherwise, if the ship had stopped in that channel, well, there would have been no hope for any of us. So anyway, we got out and we steamed away from the area, and the engines were slowly dying because steam was dropping off with the boilers salting up. We managed to get about 12 kilometres off the coast, had radioed for help. We anchored about 12 k's off the coast, as I said, and we anchored there and waited for help to come. The next day, an American supply ship arrived and took us in tow. Well, we weren't able to raise the anchor because we had no steam, so we had to break the cable and left the anchor where it was. In the meantime, I didn't mention we buried Percy and Stan tied up in their hammocks, which was the Navy way at the time. The supply ship arrived, took us in tow, towed us to another island that was American occupied, and they were met there by a salvage ship, and they welded a plate over the hull, pumped the engines, the water out of the engine room, and then towed us from there across from the Solomons to the New Guinea mainland to a place called Finschhafen. There we were met by another one of our ships, HMAS Swan, and Swan towed us all the way back to Sydney. It took 11 days to get back. We were put into dockyard hands and they started to repair the ship. A few weeks after that, the war ended and I was sent to a frigate. And going to a frigate from a Corvette was like going to a cruise ship from a rowing boat. So that was quite comfortable.
I was reading somewhere this description that the Corvettes were designed by Australians who had never designed warships before, built by Australians who had never built ships before, and manned by Australians, most of whom had never been to sea before.